Assalamu alaikum. My name is Dr. Aisha El-Amin, and on behalf of Imam Tariq El-Amin and the Talim Committee, chaired by myself, along with my beautiful brother and sister, Dr. Lionel Allen, and sister, Dr. Gloria Bashir. I want to thank you for joining us. I also want to ask, if you are not subscribed to our YouTube channel, Masjid Al-Taqwa's YouTube channel, you can find this Talim, previous Talims, as well as Khutbah. So please do subscribe and like us. And inshallah, today's Talim will be led by Imam Tariq El-Amin, our resident Imam, who will talk a little bit about Juneteenth, what it means. And then we'll go into a bit of question and answer. As many of you know, we have in Chicago and around the world, in the country rather, it's a little bit different, but we just received word right on Juneteenth that it will be a state holiday, which is pretty big for our state and has multiple implications. But not to take away from Imam Tariq's talk, I will turn it over to him now.
Thank you so much, Dr. Aisha. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Let's open up with Al-Fatiha, inshallah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladhina an'amta alayhim. Ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. Amin. Assalamu alaikum again, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you all in this space, and hopefully this conversation is going to spur further research on all of our parts. As we know, we've got an hour. We do good, I think, because we begin even when we begin a little bit after, we still make a point of trying to be done by 2 o'clock, respecting everyone's day. So I only preface my remarks with that to say that there's so much information in what I want to present today that obviously 50 minutes is not going to be sufficient enough time. And what I want to talk about today, as we just as a nation, right, we can say that there was a greater observance and awareness of Juneteenth as we've just passed it on June 19th. Here we are on the cusp of another national holiday, Independence Day, and obviously we can see the relationship between the two, in that both stand for, at their heart, there is this recognition of freedom. Independence and freedom, they go hand in hand. But I want to look at these two things and a few other things I want to throw in as well for your consideration through the lens of caste. And brother, Brother Rod actually was one of the first people I think that brought the book to me, mentioned it to me. And many of you may be aware of it already, but it's the I think I just went over it, but it's a book written by Isabel Wilkerson. She was a columnist at one time for the New York Times, but she's also the author of a book called The Warmth of Other Suns, which kind of chronicles the Great Migration, the millions of African Americans that came up from the South to the North looking for freedom and opportunity, and freedom particularly from the brutal environment of the Jim Crow South, wherein lynchings went unpunished, and it was just terrorism was a fact of life in those spaces, and this is not something that is new to you all. Many of you know this, have families, either may have been actually born in the South in these environments, so this is nothing new. But it was a beautiful book. But the book that she wrote, Caste, which was really a phenomenal book, and I'm going to encourage everybody to get that. As a matter of fact, I'm going to put it up on the screen in a moment if you have not, or we'll actually, if we can put that in the chat, the link to it, the link to the book. I would highly recommend its reading, because what it does, it actually gives us a different lens to be able to look at some of the events of the past and present through, and see them within kind of an expanded focus, where we're not just seeing these things as acts of racial injustice or a struggle for racial justice or recognition, or even expanding and thinking about, you know, our human dignity, but to understand that these things are situated within this idea of caste. And caste, if you're not aware of the definition of caste, it basically, and the way that Ms. Wilkerson uses it, she talks about it as the systems of dividing society into hereditary classes. Much like if you're familiar with the caste system in India, where at the bottom they have the bottom of the caste is called the Dalits, or the untouchables, and it doesn't matter what you do or where you go, how much education you get, you will always be an untouchable. You will always be a Dalit. They are looked on so lowly, whereas if you recall with the Jim Crow laws, and the black codes and Jim Crow laws, where that had, if a black person was walking down the street and a white person was walking towards them on the same street, the black person had to get off of the sidewalk, actually, right, and step into the street, right, and give them the right of way. They have very much a similar practice, which actually goes even a bit further. And their practice is that the shadow of the Dalit, the shadow of this person, cannot touch, right? Cannot be cast upon the higher caste or any of the other castes, right? Their shadow is a pollution. Their shadow in and of itself is a pollution, right? They can't use the same roads, period. They don't have access. So it shows the, you know, there's a connection, but it's rooted in a narrative. It's rooted in a narrative. And this is also a word which, with regard to caste, right, the stories that have made these narratives possible within the caste system of India. This narrative is rooted in theology. It's rooted in their text, right, the Hindu text. In America, yes, it does have some grounding in the misuse of biblical theology, biblical interpretation, but it's also rooted in the legal system itself, in legislation and actual laws that legislated separate but equal, right? I'm sorry, not separate, the separation, right? The clear segregation of the quote unquote races and the behavior that was expected, right? The absolute, you know, separation, and this type of narrative, you know, it allowed for this transference of not just being about the day itself, or, you know, this particular year, right? These laws were to exist and be enforced, you know, in perpetuity, right? You know, forever. So you have a system of being, you have a classification, you have a caste that, you know, that outlives the moment. So we come to, we reference Juneteenth for really not so much just to go into Juneteenth. We'll mention a few things about Juneteenth, but I want to really kind of connect this idea of caste, this hereditary stratification, and narrative. You know, the stories that we tell that reinforce the belief or the validity of this hierarchy or stratification through two examples, right, which both should represent freedom, but are very much looked at in a completely, you know, in opposite ways, and it is really due to this caste system that has played out over millennia, But now we see the function of white supremacy and racism really in service of caste. And I think that the two events that I'm going to bring up, well, I could say three, but two events I'm going to bring up: the Haitian Revolution, the Spartacus slave revolt, and last, the Berlin Congress. These are three things that I want to bring up, but kind of backdrop is Juneteenth. So we'll start off with Juneteenth, and I want to bring up a quick image if I've got a sharing capability of the let me see, where is this at? All right, am I able to share right now?
Sure.
Okay. All right, let me get back in here. And share screen. Okay. All right, so everybody sees the you see the screen? Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So this flag was created, designed by, or the design was led by Ben Haith back in '97. He is the founder of the Juneteenth. What is it? The Juneteenth National Remembrance Foundation or Commemoration Foundation. But he is the leader of that group that got, that it kind of began for us to get the traction, so that now Juneteenth is popping up as a paid state holiday, or popping up on county legislation, city, and inshallah we're going to see this where it takes on even greater national significance as well in the future. But this flag was designed back in 1997, and want to kind of go over just one of the elements on here, which actually, well, we'll explain the elements, and then we'll kind of get into how this is also related to storytelling and narrative. So the star in the middle, obviously, as we know, June 19th, 1865. Before we get to the imagery, June 19th, 1865, Union soldiers coming from Illinois, which some folks are not aware of, coming from Illinois with a large contingent of African American Union soldiers that had fought, right? Risking their own lives, making sure that they could deliver the news to Galveston, Texas, to those who are enslaved who are not yet aware. And it's possible that they were aware, right? That news had possibly reached, but they had not been. Obviously, those who were enslaving folks had not abided by that legislation, right? But even still, that's really not worth arguing about. But they delivered the news to them that they had been emancipated, right? So this was the day of celebration, obviously, and they came there in force to make sure that that law was abided by. So you got the date on the side, and that's its significance, pretty plain and clear. The star in the middle, Texas is known as the Lone Star State. So that star represents or relates to that. Now the star pattern around that star is actually called it's a burst pattern, which is after the nova sign. And not sign, but the nova itself. It's like when a new star forms, the burst pattern. So it refers to newness, as in this was a new chapter for African Americans. It was it represented newness, a new start, right? And this is a powerful imagery and a powerful story behind that. Now, when we think about, let me take this down now. Okay, so when we think about newness, some of you may recall how, Imam Muhammad referred to us as a new people. And that is true on, many, many different fronts, right? We could take that from our makeup, right? From our very makeup, the mixing of these different tribes, these different groups, the outlooks that we have, the experience that we had coming to this land, to this country. We are absolutely a new people in just about every sense of the word. But a new people that is treated in the same old way, a new people that has yet to escape the confines of the caste system, finds itself in the same condition as its predecessors, right? At least in terms of its treatment, right? So, as I said, we're on the cusp of July 4th, Independence Day. I want to share another quick photo in terms of what the quote unquote dominant caste or dominant culture identifies with and what it repels. So I mentioned the Spartacus slave revolt. Actually, I'm not going to share this image. It's, well, why not? Yeah, I'll put it up here real quick. All right. Don't seem to have the button. Okay, here we go. All right. So this is this is a depiction of what it would have, what they imagined the Spartacus slave revolt would have looked like. They actually classify this under the Third Servile Wars, the uprisings within the Roman Empire of those who had been enslaved, and among the enslaved were those who were who had to who were made to fight, right? Those who were put out in the gladiator schools and such, right? And that's what Spartacus was known for. Now I want to move over here. Is this it? Okay, here. This is the Haitian Revolution, 1791. Toussaint Louverture, and there were three other individuals who also were leaders of this revolution that they don't get talked about as much, but this was the most successful, were the first successful revolt against European powers in the not North America, in the across the Atlantic for them. But these two things are looked at, these two instances are looked at in completely different terms. The Spartacus is valorized. Spartacus, there's been, Kirk Douglas played Spartacus. There's a Spartacus television show. There have been, books. There have been, matter of fact, there was, multiple television shows, right? And they say that this was within the Roman Empire, this was the most successful, even though it ended with their defeat. But it was the most successful, war or uprising, or revolt, within history of the Roman Empire. And that was a fairly long history. One of the prominent philosophers, I wish I could remember which one it was, but he said that it was the only just war in the history of mankind as it stood at that point. He said it was the only just war. Now, in comparison to the treatment or the narrative around the Haitian Revolution, right, 1791, well, let's think about, and I want to actually pause for a second before I just kind of run right through. How many are familiar with or know some of the details of the Haitian Revolution? Anybody? Show of hands. Very little. Okay. And that's why I said, thank you for that. in the chat. And that's why I said that this small introduction, this small, just to kind of bring these things up within the context of the stories that we're told, what we're told to value, and more importantly, what the dominant caste, if you will, is told to value and told to reject. Why these are important, and obviously why this would require, a lot more reading. But basically, 1791 in Haiti, Toussaint Louverture, he leads the first success. Yes, alhamdulillah. Okay, so Brother Rob put Savannah, Georgia honored it. So, and this is one of the dates. This is one of the events that really should be celebrated, right? That should be celebrated because it's a celebration of, of freedom, right? And what most people don't know, and I actually was not even aware of myself until recently, is that it was not only the those who had been enslaved in Haiti. It was not just those of African descent, because they want to give you a broad picture of everybody that was involved. It was the those who are mixed. They really focused on these different designations. You had the mulattoes and what was it, octoroon, quadroons, all this, ways to quantify blackness. But there were also Polish people, right? There were Polish people who had actually been, and this is actually further down because the revolution, this is a revolution that spanned, a bit of time from 91. I think it went on for, was it like 12 years? Like the British tried to come back and come at them. The French came back again. The Spaniards, they wanted some. So everybody was benefiting from the forced labor in Haiti, and what is also now today the Dominican Republic, that was controlled by the Spaniards. But when they were expelled, right? They were fighting. The ultimate response to the freedom that was acquired was an embargo. And this is what I felt, was actually also quite interesting. The response to freedom. I'm sorry, I stepped ahead. I was talking about the Poles, the Polish. So the Polish, France, Napoleon, he had another war going on at the same time. He sent troops back over. That's right. He sent troops back over because the Haitian forces had routed them. They starved them out, and they not only routed them out, but nature, Allah's nature was working against them as well. So hundreds of them, a great percentage of their forces were taken out by yellow fever. They didn't have the immune systems to deal with the native diseases, that they didn't have it. So it wiped them out as well. But he sent over some of the Poles who were also going through their own uprising against Prussia, if I'm not mistaken. And once the Poles, they were, as a part of the group, the forces they sent over, once they found out why the Haitians were fighting, they were fighting because they did not want to be enslaved. They identified with them, and they actually switched and they started fighting with the Haitians. Right, so they were part of that uprising. As a matter of fact, the rulers, the legislators in Haiti at that point, they referred to them as they referred to them as black. Right, they said, after the government is created, they referred to the Poles who had fought. They said they were black. They called them the Negroes of the was it something which it was honorific, right? It was an honorific that was given to them, right? They had their black card for real, right? You fought with us, you resisted tyranny, you identified with a just cause. And that's also not a story that is told. And I only bring up Spartacus, like I said, this may feel like we're throwing, I'm throwing a lot of stuff, because I am really, the point is, these are things that we should look into, look up and think about, but understand that these are things that are in service of caste. All right, so I mentioned the embargo. Embargo happens in 1806. United States is worried. Matter of fact, they are scared to death of not just the fact that this revolt took place, but that it was successful, and not that it, because like I said, they fought back multiple attempts to regain and to re-enslave, to reimpose slavery in Haiti. So this was a problem for them. This was a very big problem for them. This is ironically, not even 30 years after the United States declares its own independence, right? No, not even 30 years. This is less than 20 years, right? 1776. Yeah, this is 1791. This is less than 20 years. But their response is, because they are aligned in purpose, and they are aligned in maintaining this this stratification. They side with the French, right? They side with the French, and they place a trading embargo on Haiti, because they don't want that type of energy. They don't want that to to spread right here, on home turf, right? So they placed a trading embargo, no trade at all with them. Haiti is also, at this point, like I said, the revolution was in 1791. This is 1806. So we've got more than a decade of not just fighting, but now there's internal fighting that's going on as well. France places a embargo on them, and their embargo, the basis of that, France, Spain, Great Britain, all of the European powers have isolated. They have isolated Haiti, right? Haiti has declared their independence, but and after fighting off oppressors and declaring their independence, their freedom, their right to self-rule, they are met with they are punished by the European world, including the United States of America. And one of the provisions, one of the things that they pushed for, they said that Haiti owed France for its losses with regard to slave labor, and that until it made restitution, that it would hold fast to that embargo, right? So once again, you see, the idea, it doesn't matter what you do, right? In their eyes, it doesn't matter what you do, as long as you are you, then you will be in a subordinate position, right? Freedom is not something that you will ever really have. And furthermore, when it comes to the stories that we tell ourselves about us and about you, this is not one of the stories that we're going to tell. We're not going to talk to you about how 100 years after the revolution, Haitian Revolution, we have the Berlin Congress, also called the Congo Conference. Is anybody who's familiar with King Leopold? If you're not, this is somebody. I know if I ask us, are we familiar with the Holocaust? We'd all be familiar. We all know. I mean, how many lives are said to have been lost in the Holocaust, taken in the Holocaust? We hear the number all the time. It's like a number that should just really pop right out. How many millions? 6, right? 6 million, right? And that does not include the millions of other undesirables that were also executed, that were also interred in those camps. But yeah, 6 million. King Leopold, this this savage, he is responsible for the deaths of 10 million Africans. 10 million, right? And give me one second, I'm gonna pull this up for you. Yeah, and okay, where are we at? Yeah, so he's from yeah, King Leopold II of Belgium. So when I mentioned the Berlin Conference, so I was a little bit off. It wasn't actually 100 years, just about 100 years, right? 1791 for the Haitian Revolution. 1885, the Berlin Conference took place, and in the 23 years, he founded a corporate state in Central Africa, which was privately owned by him. Today, refer to this as the Congo, right? But he massacred 10 million Africans by cutting off their hands and genitals, flogging them to death, starving them into forced labor. And nobody talks about this, right? But he meted out these punishments for failure to reach daily rubber quotas, right? But the Belgian Conference was important for a number of reasons. And you can, read more about his atrocities and that Holocaust that took place that has never received the recognition. No one has ever been held accountable for that. But yeah, read on. The Berlin Conference took place. The map that we have of Africa today is a result of the Berlin Conference. You had European powers that had been, into Africa, for years and years, for decades, centuries even, right? That there was awareness after the transatlantic slave trade, right? Even after the transatlantic slave trade, there was movement into Africa to, to shore up the growth that was taking place throughout Europe, throughout the European continent, that supported their growth in industry. So the Industrial Revolution is taking place during this time as well. So all of the elements and materials that would allow for them to be competitive in a global and increasingly more globalized market, all those resources are in Africa. And Africa is inhabited by Africans. And they had been, the first strategy that they used in terms of taking out the slave labor, taking out potential slave labor, was to arm warring tribes. There's a book written, it talks about this to a degree. The book is called Primitivism, Mysticism, and Tribalism, and Genocide in the African continent. It's a book that it kind of shows how Africa was destroyed from within, not necessarily just from the advances of European exploitation, but from within. They would, whether it was Portugal or the British or whomever, they would come and they would give arms, right? They would say, we'll trade with you, but the only trade we're going to do is we will trade arms with you. We'll give you munitions, but what we'll take from you is we want captives, right? We want we want slaves. We need labor. So you give us people, we'll give you these arms. You give us people, we'll give you arms. So that was the basis of that internal slave trade, the complicity, of Africans looking to vanquish their enemies, becoming stronger than those around them. Had no idea that, 100 years later, a few generations later, that these same people would come back in and divide up their country. And that is basically what they did. So the map we today is the map we have today is a result of the Berlin Conference that was started by the same King Leopold II of Belgium, who massacred, who killed 10 million Africans, right? And the purpose of that conference was, I don't know if I said this or not, but the purpose of that conference was to keep Europeans from fighting with each other, right? So you had British trying to advance their interests, you had the French trying to advance their interests, you had the Dutch advancing their interests, you had all of these different, colonizers who were looking to stake a claim in Africa, right? To extract the resources, to colonize, to institute forced labor, and they were at the point where they were about to start having issues with one another, right? They're going to start fighting. He says, no, let's not do that. We're civilized. We don't fight. We don't fight each other. We don't do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to draw up a map. We're going to divide the land. We know where the resources are. We know the preferable spaces, and we're going to assign those spaces. We're going to agree on who gets what. So the French got their sections, their places. The British got their places. The Portuguese got their places. The Spanish got the Dutch got their spaces. The Germans got their spaces, right? The Belgium already had, the Congo. And of course, this is all done without consent, without negotiation, without talking to, the indigenous people, without talking to Africans. And you see the results, right? The story tells the languages that are spoken in these places tell the story of what happened during those times. So when you go to Senegal, when you go to Mali, when you go to any of the nations that are there today, and you hear people speaking French, right, or those that are speaking English, you go to Ghana, right? They speak English just like everybody else, right? The evidence of that agreement, it's in the languages that are spoken. It's in the administration, and furthermore, it tells a story of dominance and subservience, right? So where was I going? Oh, so the kind of contrast the Berlin Conference, the willingness to cooperate in order to subjugate, contrast that with, or think about the embargo, where America and these other European powers, where they participated together in order to keep these people who had fought for their freedom, who had died for their freedom, to keep them from being able to really enjoy the benefits of their freedom, right? To keep them from being able to benefit from the fruits, the natural resources that existed in their land, right? And then think about this with Juneteenth. Once again, the people who were denied their freedom, denied the opportunity, the ability to exercise that freedom and to benefit from what it means, to be free. There's a story to be told, I think, and it relates back to, or pushes us back to this realization that just as that star on that flag would suggest suggest to us that we are a new people, this is a new beginning, this also must be taken into consideration that until they are a new people, right? Until they are new people, and which they actually are, right? They became a new people. This idea of whiteness is the new people, and that reality, that element. I saw a question come up. That is something that actually we got to move away from that. That a part of the freedom and the dignity that has been sought by African Americans, by indigenous people, by any oppressed people around the world, is really a representation. It's in in conversation with this reality, this new people, this new consciousness that has arisen out of what could have been looked at as different segments of the European experience or identity into this one identity that cooperates based upon whiteness. And as long as that identity is intact, until a new identity has to develop, a new people has to develop out of that, or come back out of that, or either reject that, in order to find its footing amongst humanity in general. What are you saying? Question: what are some of the lessons we should take from all these moments in history for our work today? Great question. I think it's important for us to be able to see the big picture and not to get lost in just in the celebration. It was a great thing for us to hear people talking about Juneteenth. I mean, that was great. It's great to see the flags. Matter of fact, I'm rolling next year. I was trying to find me this big flag to go on the back of my truck so I could roll around with the Juneteenth flag, right? And that's a nice form of expression. But if we have not learned anything, we have learned that expressions or symbolism does not necessarily equate to realities. And the realities, I'll give you another example. Everybody's familiar with apartheid, right? South Africa, the same system that is now being used to describe the reality, the life, the political and cultural environment in Israel today. They are described as an apartheid state in reference to the political, social, cultural reality that existed in South Africa. This ended back in '93. Not back in 1993. Apartheid ended. Remember seeing Nelson Mandela, step up. The African National Congress. Everybody, they're victorious. They're celebrating. And what we didn't see, and of course, this is during the leader, the president was I can't remember his first name, de Klerk, his last name, de Klerk. What people don't talk about or not really aware of is that before a majority Black political party could ascend to power and take the keys, control of government, right? Before that would happen, something that was unheard of would take place between 91, was it 90 and 92 or 91, that had not taken place with in any of the world in terms of nuclear proliferation. There are 9 nations today that are nuclear, that have nuclear weapons, they have nuclear armaments, nine of them. Don't know if I know them all. Let's see if we know them all. Who is it? U.S., France, North Korea, India, Pakistan, Israel, China. Did I say France already? France, somebody else, or it's like the European Union, something along that line. But South Africa was one of those nations. South Africa was in possession of nuclear armaments. Russia, yes, Russia. Thank you. How can we forget them? The Cold War and everything. But South Africa also had nuclear armaments. They started their program back in like 48, 49. They had seven nuclear like long guns or whatever, but they had nuclear capability. They signed on to the non-proliferation agreement and deconstructed, tore down their program and their weapons in 92. I think it was 92. But they did it before handing over the keys to to Mandela, handing over the keys to the African National Congress to the Africans, right? To Black folks. They did it before that. So there's something that, once again, there's a story to be told just in that. And of course, once you sign on to that non-proliferation agreement, that means that, you know, you're not doing any particular kinds of research. You're not selling or you're not buying anything. You can't start a program back up. If you look at the G7, you know, this group of, you know, the largest economies in the world, nobody has a tan, right? There's no Black folks in there. Even though Africa, the African economy itself, right, this African continent, it's its own economy. It really is. I mean, if it was without the division properly directed, and there are folks that are trying to direct it and trying to move in a way where it's an economy unto itself, right? It really surpasses the global economy, right, but on its own. But because it's been engaged in a way where it's been a place where people have been able to extract wealth but not bring wealth back to it. That's a foreign idea, and that's a completely different narrative. There are people who are there, you know, countries, nations within Africa that are actually working towards that. But the big lesson, number one, is about division. Is to not let ourselves be divided. And the Quran speaks about that, right? Do not be divided amongst yourselves. The second lesson is for us to understand what is real, right? And what is real is going to allow us to not get caught up in the illusions, right? The illusions of you know, saying, yeah, you know, we're all equal, we're all this, we're all that, but at the same time, continuing to uphold the you know, kind of these, I don't want to say time honored, but systems and practices that keep one group subordinate and one subordinate and one group elevated. All right, so I'm gonna I'll pause there and ask if there are any. I should have paused 5 minutes ago. If there are any comments or any questions. Okay, so one question that I think about with this in terms of future possibilities or things that should accompany the national recognition of Juneteenth and what it represents. And it kind of goes along with the same demands that were made upon Haiti after their revolution, demands that were made by France, but also upheld by the United States, saying that the Haitians owed reparations, right? They owed France money for their losses. I say this also thinking about the 10 million lives that were taken, you know, in gruesome fashion, in, you know, in the Congo by King Leopold of Belgium, and the reparations that were never given them. I say this thinking about the wealth gap that exists here in the United States of America between Black and white that continues to widen. That reparations, it is not a handout. Although the story that is being told by some about it to say, well, you don't need to give people that because they don't need reparations. It'll make them lazy. It'll make them this and that. We don't need to listen to that type of. We don't need to entertain that type of thinking. We should really be thinking about becoming that kind of a single focus block, you know, for those who seek our votes, for those who seek to represent us. Reparations needs to be brought back up into the political discourse. It's something that we don't need to back away from. We need to really double down on. It's something that that we are owed, and it is a step towards justice. So that's one of the things. Well, I guess one of the questions I think about, what are like next steps, right? We should be a part of amplifying those types of concerns. Let me see, what did our brother Rod say? Those same forces that are attempting an apartheid system in the U.S. with voter suppression. Absolutely. A major lesson is to educate future generations in our own history. Each generation of our children are targets for education and programming that is against their proper positive self-image and growth.
I'm wondering if Brother Rod wants to say a little bit more about that comment.
Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Thank you very much for this presentation. And what I'm trying to say in my comment in the chat is that, and I had this conversation with a number of people yesterday. I was fortunate enough to have my neighbor's birthday party. He and his wife are both from South America and the Caribbean, but their friends are from Haiti and Jamaica. And we were having a conversation about the different attitudes about a number of things regarding African Americans on the mainland and the experiences that they had in the islands. And they're quick to say that they were some of the first to rise up, unlike our people here in this part of the world. Another thing that we talked about is that, as I said in the chat, we kind of get disconnected from our young people on keeping this history alive. And I often say to myself, when I was coming up, we saw a lot of positive programs about the Caucasian mind on television. So we came up respecting that mentality. And until you interact with a number of Caucasians, you realize that that image that they portrayed on television and in the media is not the real image, is not the real person. And so it's important that we stay connected to our history so that we'll have some foundational knowledge on who we are as we interact with them in the broader society. The other thing I mentioned is, I think it's important in light of your presentation today on Juneteenth, that we go back and read Frederick Douglass's speech on what does the 4th of July mean to the Negro. And it's directly related to what you mentioned today. And hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about that at some point.
Thank you so much, Brother Rod Bashir. Thank you so much, Imam Tariq El-Amin. And thank you, dear believers, for joining us. As a reminder, this will be, do you have one more thing that you'd like to say, Tariq? I can so please, we have about 30 seconds left.
Okay, really quick. Brother Rod mentioned talking about Jamaica. You got to look up the Maroons. These were, they threw off their slave shackles and revolted, went into the mountains, and were never, they could not catch these folks. There were over 200, and speaking about mainland right here in North America, there were over 250 slave revolts, right? The revolts of enslaved people. I hate using the word slave, but that's also a part of the history that they don't tell us about, right? They don't tell us. We didn't take this line down. Okay, thank you. I'm done.
Alhamdulillah. I know there's a lot of great history, and inshallah we will have continued series because as we all know, Black history is everyone's history. So Bismillah, may Allah bless you all with a beautiful week. Thank you for your presentation today and for the history lesson. And inshallah, please subscribe to Masjid Al-Taqwa's YouTube channel. And dear believers, have a beautiful week.
Alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you.